Well, this is one of the exclusive chats which we are having around a big fundraise which India's most valued company, Reliance Industries, has recently done. A $4 billion foreign currency bond issue. This is the biggest foreign currency bond issue done by any corporate in India. And Citibank's Ashu Khullar is joining us now, who has been instrumental in helping the company raise this big fund. Ashu, afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. Let's start by understanding the significance of this, not only for the company, overall for the ecosystem, the fundraising ecosystem, a $4 billion foreign currency bond issue by an Indian corporate.
Yeah, no, Ajay, I think certainly Reliance has started the year with a big bang. And I think it's kind of their tradition to do things in a very big way, in a very innovative way. And I think this is an extension, very much an extension of that philosophy. And as you yourself noted, I think it's the largest foreign currency bond by an Indian issuer. It's also the tightest spread ever achieved by an Indian corporate. And then even if you look at from an Asia perspective, certainly the first 40-year tranche by an Asian corporate. And I think it's even the lowest coupons achieved by an Asian corporate in the 30 and 40-year categories. Huge demand and, great timing, I think, from our perspective, which Reliance chose. Investors are fresh with money in the new year allocations. I think there is going to be a fair amount of interest for companies worldwide to try and hit the, bond markets, as you noted, because I think there's an expectation that the rates may be headed higher. So I think, again, from that perspective, I think great timing. It's also been a while. Reliance is coming back to the international bond markets after a gap of 4 years. And if you look at the journey which the company has had from what used to be a more traditional oil and gas company to now, look at Jio, look at their retail strategy, look at the new energy strategy, but it's a totally transformed company. It's a totally transformed credit. And I'd say that while the equity markets have had an experience of going through the journey, this is probably the first time the fixed income global investors, the top asset managers, the top insurance companies, the banks have had an opportunity to hear that story. And I think I'd say the investors have voted with their wallets. And that's why you had a book which was almost 3 times the size of the deal. And to put it in context, Ajay, last year, the entire foreign currency bond issuance from India was $21 billion. And this one deal had an order book of, over $11.5 billion. So I think in multiple ways, I'd say a very, very significant transaction for Reliance. And then, as you noted, I think it does open up, in my view, an opportunity for a number of other Indian corporates, Indian banks, to try and use the momentum. And I think while the rates are still in a historic context, while the treasuries may have moved up a few basis points in the historic context, I think it's still a great opportunity for issuers to go and raise some, lock in some very attractive pricing.
Well, Ashu, Reliance is synonymous with size and scale, isn't it? So it's not a surprise that 25% of the entire bond fundraise done last year has been done by this one deal. But I want to scratch that point of, the way business model of the company is changing, the way they manage their balance sheet also went through a big change. We saw the chairman of the company speak about being debt-free a couple of years back, and then the entire corporate India went in that direction of aiming to be debt-free. Of course, Reliance was indicating its net debt-free status. Now they are aiming towards reducing the cost of debt, whatever debt they have on their balance sheet, by swapping it with much cheaper long-term duration. So what were the conversations like for the company among the investors you were interacting with? If you could share around this transaction.
Yeah, so listen, I think, Ajay, Reliance is obviously a strong credit, a very, very strong credit. And I think the purpose of financing here is refinancing. So this is not really about increasing, leverage or debt on the company. It's very much about, as you said, reducing the cost of funding and also locking in very long-term money at very, very attractive coupons, right? Very attractive pricing. And I think from the investor perspective, of course, they love the credit. I think they love the new story, as we talked about earlier. And also, I think it's a vote of confidence in India. I think it's a vote of confidence in corporate India, because, last couple of months, last year, we saw some volatility with the Chinese real estate crisis. and probably the environment wasn't great. But I think like I said, I think this does set a very good base for a broader market. So I don't think the leverage is an issue.
Ashu,
here.
what are the,
Ajay,
if you could share, I know you cannot share about the client names.
Sorry? Yeah, the investors. So I think again, the investor book,
yeah, please
very
go ahead.
strong. So I think over 200 accounts came in with orders. I'd say a bit over 50% were Asian names, and then US, Europe. A big chunk, high quality names, asset managers, a lot of insurance company interest from the US, from Taiwan, because they want long tenor paper given their liabilities. And then of course you have bank and other sovereign wealth funds. So very, very high quality set of investors. Broadly, diversified by geography, by type. And certainly the deal had the size, to give them appropriate allocations as well.
Right. Ashu, I'm curious to ask you, with Reliance, there's no question about the quality of cash flows. I mean, they are just getting better and better every decade. New avenues of bigger cash flows are opening up. If yesteryears, they started with textile and then, of course, petrochem and oil and gas. Now, the complexion of the company changed into technology, with digital and geo, etc., platform company. And now it's looking towards a new energy, which is unspoken of, at least in this part of the world. Work conversations also came up around this new energy foray. Anything which you can share?
Yeah, listen, I mean, again, I think it's all part of the investor story, right, which the company shares. And I think they've shared it, and what they told investors here is what they've been talking to the investors. So I think it's a corporate deal, right? So people buy the whole corporate story. But again, I think, Reliance moves early and moves big. I think you saw it in telecoms, and we've seen it on the new energy side as well. ESG is very much the hot topic, and I think it's a need of the hour. It's a reality, and I think it's great to see Indian companies also take up the mantle in towards the energy, towards the new energy and the ESG friendly transformation.
Great. All right, Ashu, we'll let you go on that one. Bigger, longer discussion on many other subjects is due for another time.
Definitely.
But today, congratulations on getting this large transaction sailed through so nicely, and also for your chat here.
No, pleasure to talk to you.
So we have a very special chat with Asit Bhatia of Bank of America Merrill Lynch, who has also been instrumental in concluding this historic transaction, which has just happened. India's most valued company raising $4 billion in overseas bond issue, the largest we've seen so far. Asit, thanks for joining us. Tell us, how do you really see this transaction? It's quite meaningful. We have not seen such a thing, such a large transaction before. In fact, 25% of the entire years last year. So can you help us explain the significance of this?
You took the words out of my mouth. I mean, last year, I think India Inc. probably raised, call it 22 odd billion dollars in the US dollar bond markets. In the first week of January, we have a $4 billion jumbo issuance, coming out of India's largest, private sector company. And think of all of what has been achieved in this transaction. And when I say all of what has been achieved, I'm referring two or three, landmarks over here. It's obviously the largest ever transaction in a single day issuance by any corporate out of India. It has the lowest coupon ever for a 30-year bond. It is a first ever 40-year transaction that has been done out of India ever. So there are several landmarks that were achieved as a result of this transaction. The order books on this transaction were close to 12 billion, between 11.5 and 12 billion dollars. You had global funds participating from Asia, Europe, and the US. So it really, in every way, it is a landmark transaction, and opens the doors for other Indian corporates to follow suit during 2022.
Right. Asit, tell us about the story which you and other bankers have interacted with these clients. I mean, I'm sure they've done their own due diligence, but how compelling does the Reliance story look now? Because every decade, Reliance just metamorphosizes into a new company.
So, when we've done our previous bond issuances, and we've been involved with Reliance over several bond issuances over the last several years, it was always looked at in some form and O2C, an oil to chemicals, a refining petrochemical story. But if you look at a Reliance that has transformed itself over the last, call it 4 or 5 years, where now almost 50% of its, EBITDA comes from the new age sectors, which is geo and retail. You really had a transformational story which had to be, told to the investors, which was obviously exceedingly well, received by the investors, which is why you got the response that you have got, which is a $4 billion bond offering, the largest ever out of India, with an order book of $11.5 to $12 billion.
Right. Asit, it also tells in a way where the global interest rate, perhaps it points in that direction at least, when such a astute company such as Reliance goes ahead, does a big bond raise at a very low interest rate, locking it for long tenor, indicates perhaps that this time the rates are actually troughing out. What it also does for Reliance, of course, bring down takes step in the direction of bringing the cost of borrowing actually down. Talk to us about the balance sheet management style of Reliance Industries. You've seen them for such a long time.
So, when you look at Reliance, all right, they have committed to be a net debt zero company by March 21 of last year. And they actually achieved it well before that, which was June of 2020. Now, they're very committed to maintaining their ratings, profiles, which we all know is 1 and 2 notches over India rating.